So we're just completing 4, or a bit more of 4. This is the first time in the evolution of mankind or humankind, as we grow through evolution of consciousness, that we develop what responsibility is, the idea that I'm responsible for what I do. But being prudent, taking prudent steps, and not going in like 3, where everything is taking risks and it doesn't matter the consequences. Now we're on the other side. 4 begins to learn honesty and learns it fully by 7. Kindly, dependable, selflessness. It's another quality of 4. And they're also highly conscientious. A solid 4 thinker will work the whole night through just to get the job done right, patiently, diligently. A 4 would be the best employee ever because they'll carry on the orders from above. They understand there is a hierarchy, and their place in the hierarchy will take great pleasure in being called a model employee. But the problem with 4 is you end up with more rules, an enormously bloated government with lots of departments that have lots of rules, where you have all the bureaucrats who tell everybody else what to do and what everybody else has to do, but they won't do it themselves. Nowadays, values level 4 men and women are members of many different porn sites. They'll never admit to it, but they are. Before porn sites, there were the magazines that every good values level 4 man would have stashed somewhere. On the surface, they say, oh no, it's a moral thing. We need to stay together for the rest of our lives. Monogamy once we're married. We'll have 65 years of marriage till death do us part. Regardless of whether the relationship works or not, it's duty and responsibility, especially once the children come about. But at the same time, having a series of multiple affairs and then confessing these things to the priest on a Sunday. Because that's also a 4th thing. I'm confessing my sins. I will do better. I'll go and do it again. Nothing changes, though, because everything's redundant and in the same box. Loyalty in 4 can become beyond belief and at the same time infinitely possessive, to the point where the other partner in the relationship becomes almost like property. And that's obviously not good. It's not conducive to a good relationship. 4 can be very patient, but at the same time very suspicious and very cold, because real feelings are a sign of weakness. If you go back in history to the Victorian era, where it was a shame almost to recognize that you have emotions. For a long time in families, boys don't cry. That's an absolute level 4 statement, because God forbid they're human beings. They're not, they're not just machines. They don't have emotions. And then if you wanted to become anything, you've got to dissociate from your emotions, because if you add emotion equals, again, complex equivalence, it equals weakness to the thinking of 4. 4 believes a penny saved is a penny earned, but at the same time, you will not get a 4 to spend money, because they're incredibly stingy, because we save now for later. Everything's later. Pleasure later, money later, gifts later, holidays later, everything's later. But unfortunately, 4 creates a win-lose world. It can actually be even a lose-lose world. But it's a little bit of a win depending on who sets the persecution for the loser. Because in 4, any conflict, any act of disobedience must be dealt with promptly and with force, in your face, because 4 expects to be punished if they made a mistake. And they'll carry their punishment, and they'll be guilty forever because they've made a mistake, and in fact, for crying out loud, just because they were born. So a solid level 4 thinker believes the only way to get things done is to punish the offender, because if the offender didn't do as he or she was told, they must be punished, not should. The one in charge must always increase pressure, tighten the screw, and even keep the losing party down. The loser, in order to stop the living daylights being squeezed out of them, wants to use all their creativity to figure out how to defeat the system that the winner is operating under right now. And as we'll see, that's what gives birth to values level 5, among other things, because at some point, everybody is squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, and the loser, who could be a person, an institution, a business, a country, has to find ways to work around the system, because the system is so tight that you cannot work from within the system. It's just impossible. So there's no solution from inside the tight values 4 box. So they've got to find ways to work around the system in order to be able to free themselves from the system. It's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time, as we'll see as we get to 5, because 5 is not the be all and end all. Every one of the levels is like a coin with 2 facets. It has its good and its bad. Fours follow the rules because they believe that chaos will fall, and they're so afraid of chaos. They can be so strict with the rules on themselves that it's like a martyrdom or even like a self-torture. Look, I suffer. I need this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do any of this, but look at me. I do this because I sacrifice myself. The problem with a righteous 4 is that nothing fails like success. So the saintly attempt to live the life sows the seeds of its own demise, because the righteous man, providing the neurology allows the body and the brain, especially the brain, has the potential to move on. They've got the potential to move ahead. And what happens when the first desires start to appear in consciousness because they're denied any pleasure or any things that would be nice and fun for themselves, they're living a life of abstinence. We're not going to drink more than half a glass of wine because that's just not the right thing to do. So abstinence, I'm bowing to the prescriptions of the book again, whatever the book may be, religious book or otherwise. And you have to admit that the period of time when this happens has indeed improved the conditions and existence of society in general, but only up to a point. And that point is just enough for month-to-month salary, just enough to save a few pennies, but not enough to be able to afford what I really want. So as the 5 begins to open and the desires and wishes of the 4 begin to surface into consciousness, which are appearing first, and if you remember the universal model of change, they're appearing first at point B. This is where the doubts happen. I led all the righteous life. I did everything right. Then there are those things I know I should save money, but look at those beautiful pair of shoes. And I really shouldn't do it because it's not the right thing to do, but because I shouldn't frivolously spend money and I don't want to drive my old Toyota Corolla. Nothing against Corollas, by the way. It's just an example. But I'd love to drive a new BMW. Oh, but I can't. I just can't. And then if the neighbor buys a Maserati or a Porsche, or God knows, then the 4 who has the same desires but represses them becomes even more righteous. Well, if I do the right thing, so should you. How dare you buy that car? How dare you do better? Who do you think you are? You're better than the rest of us. If we could all have bicycles, why do we need a car? Can't you just walk? Why can't you take the bus? What's wrong with you? For the benefit of all, but actually it's not the benefit of all. 4 is very righteous because if I do the right thing, so should you. So as the 4 starts to open up to 5, it is an unconscious thing that starts. And how can I find a way to express what I want? Because you see, it moves from me, sacrificial, back to expressive, which is I. How can I find a way to express what I want, but without making too many waves, because 4 hasn't fully stepped into 5 yet. 5's opening up so that the exit from 4 is just beginning. And then what goes on is, how can I express myself? How can I find ways? Right now, I bought a great car instead of just taking the bus. So they need to find reasons for which they express their desires because they don't want to make waves because there is still some leftover thinking of 4, which is, what would people think? Well, what would people think if I stick my head up against the statistics, the median, the tall poppy syndrome? What would people think if I'm the tall poppy? And this is a difficult values level 4 statement, being afraid of social judgment. And nowadays with social media, this has encouraged tremendously social disapproval. We can't say anything because everyone jumps on you and they want to tear you apart. And we can't just voice an opinion. If you voice an opinion that contradicts the consensus, then you'll have a flurry of how dare you? And then people are trained not to say anything. Either not to say anything or they're trained back into the system, and that's the mind training. It's a thinking training. So when a child grows up in a very strong authoritarian 4, which probably some of us have, when the child is trying to assert themselves and say whatever their opinion would be, if they're constantly scolded, ridiculed, deprived of love, or if they disobey, they're actually trained back into conforming. So the child needs to unconsciously find ways to operate in which ways the parents do not punish, or that they don't withhold love, or at least good relationships. So the child needs to find ways in which they are not condemned by the parents, so they learn the right way of living. Now, don't blame your parents, as they've been mind trained too. Our parents did the best they could with the resources they had. Maybe they have wronged you. Maybe they haven't been the greatest parents. Maybe they were the greatest parents. But they are no better than how they've been mind trained themselves. They went through trends when they grew up, and they learned from their parents who went through trends on their turn, and so on. So back forth to the generation after generation. So the 4 experiences a significant reaction to stress. It's very important, and that's where a lot of the possible work for us as coaches, because so many people are stressed like hell because of previous lockdowns, because of economic conditions. People have lost their jobs are threatened, everything keeps changing, AI is taking over the world. When they are in stress, their immune system goes down, because the adrenals, the glands that sit on top of the kidneys, are squeezed, and the stress hormone called cortisol is released, which assists you to deal with stress, although it's only meant to be for a short duration. And when we have a lot of stress for long duration, the adrenals release excessive cortisol, and it puts too much stress on your immune system. And when you're in stress, you can't think clearly, you can't sleep, you wake up in the middle of the night, generally between 1 and 3 a.m., you're stressed like hell, your mood is low. When people are in this state, they can't even find solutions for themselves. When they're in trouble and they're so stressed, they can't find solutions to get themselves out of trouble. 5 goes, yeah, okay, I failed 999 times. Oh, well, and then I discovered the light bulb. 5s are not afraid of making mistakes. Okay, we'll try this. Okay, we've made a mistake, and we learn and we move on. 4 would rather not try than make a mistake. So let's say that the stressor is that 4 must make a decision. It's a set of circumstances where they must make a decision, where they cannot avoid making the decision on their own without help from the authority, from the book, from the set of rules. And then they even create a short-lived depression so they don't have to make a decision. Because in depression, they punish themselves for being angry that the rightful authority has left them to make the decision on their own, and they know it's not right to be angry. So until now, they didn't have to make any decision. It was all written in the book. They were told what to do. They didn't have to think and didn't have to make decisions for themselves. So 4 is the level where you don't have to think. Someone else is thinking for you. You're just being told what to do, what to eat, what to think. It's very simple. It's all served on a silver platter. You may have some choices, of course, but it's a very secure and unchangeable situation. The climb from level 4, part C, is one of the most difficult transitions in all values levels. And that's because the environment is not conducive to assist the individuals in that transition. It used to be in the 80s and 90s, not so much anymore. So you've got to go slow and gentle. Now, all of a sudden, your values level 5 develops inside of you, which makes you crave freedom and independence. You want to be on your own. You don't want to work for a stupid boss. You don't want to work for an organization or corporation or company. You don't want to work for anyone. You want to be on your own. Now, usually people make a mistake. They design their own job. If you want to develop your own business, do not design your job until you start building your own business, because now you're facing things that you've never considered before. Public relations, marketing, and 4 hates sales. 5's based on sales. So when that happens inside the 4, then they have this conflict, because there's a need for freedom, for being their own individual, for not being part of the mass of people in the collective. And at the same time, the strategies, the decisions, the beliefs, the learnings, the skills are not quite there yet. So this conflicting situation, when the person is halfway there, halfway here, they have to move because their free energy pushes them forward. But at the same time, they go back to safety, the safety of 4. And if a client asks me, even brand new trainers might ask me, what should I do? My advice is always, do not quit your job under any circumstances. And that's what I'm telling you guys too. Don't quit your job until you learn to develop the skills in neurology and you bring enough money in your private business. Otherwise, you'll run into trouble.